Wizards GM Will Dawkins will be on with us at 10:30. So 30 minutes from now, the general manager of the Wizards will join us. And then at 11, one of my favorite people to watch, and I thought she did a phenomenal job on the draft the last two nights, Monica McNutt from ESPN will join us. She's from here. She played at Georgetown. She'll join us at 11. Ben will join us a little bit later on in the show at 12. I'll get to, what the Wizards did last night here in a moment. But this from Steele in Rockville. Steele writes, Kevin, the defense is fine. They are well coached. They've added size and playmaking. Please relax. If I hear about the defense again, I'm going to scream. A lot of you are not overly concerned about the defense. And look, the truth is, like we say with a lot of these things, especially when it comes to things like the draft, and by the way, just NFL seasons in general, you really don't know until they start playing games. But, are they well coached on defense? I mean, I certainly trust in the overall staff. I think they've got a very good staff. I think it's a borderline top 10 coaching staff. We talked about that last week. Certainly the combination, I think, of Quinn and the offensive coordinator, Kingsbury, is a really good 1-2 combination. Joe Witt Jr.'s, I'm not knocking him, but let's face it, if we're going strictly on results, it was a bad defense last year. It wasn't a good defensive football team. 26th against the run per DVOA, 23rd overall defensively. Not a team that was a massive takeaway team. I mean, it was nice that they got the 4 they got in the playoff game at Detroit. That was huge. But I don't know that they are well coached defensively. I'm not saying they're not. I just don't know enough. I know what the results were last year. And that certainly could have been as much about personnel as it was coaching. The one thing that we talked about a lot during the course of the season last year is, for me anyway, I mean, I'm just speaking from my perspective, I thought there was a bit of a disconnect with some of the players they had on defense and the overall defensive performance. I looked at them defensively and I thought, man, Frankie Louvu's really good. Bobby Wagner's really playing at a high level. Both of those players made All-Pro, second-team All-Pro. Mikey Sanderstill's a really good player. I thought Quan Martin really came on towards the end of the season. I Jeremy Chin played very well at times last year. Yes, up front, not so great. Certainly not a lot of consistency. Fowler Jr., outstanding as a pass rusher, but not good against the run. And there was kind of a disconnect for me during the course of the season. It was like, they don't have terrible players, and yet they're not performing consistently enough. They're not good enough, and they're not making up for their inability to stop the run or their inconsistency against the pass. And, we've said this a million times, against some teams that weren't very good offensively. They got a bit of a break, and they're not going to get that break this year. I mean, you can't say that definitively, but, playing the Giants twice and playing the Cowboys twice without their starting quarterback and playing, Cleveland with Deshaun Watson in the game and Carolina with, subs abound and a rookie in Chicago and, Jalen Hurts getting hurt in the second game. New Orleans' situation, that was a joke. Michael Penix Jr. in his first road start, second overall start of his career. They just weren't very good. They just weren't. But they overcame it with great offense, clearly. But I don't think it's crazy at all. And it's not that I'm uptight about it. One of the things I've very much insisted on is there is a distinct possibility that this year will be completely different than last year, just based on the fact that that's the way it works in the NFL. There's tons of variance year to year with defense. Not as much offensive, with offense, because you tend to have the same quarterback and that person touches the ball on every play. And there's just more consistency year to year with offenses, especially when you have the quarterback solved, whether it's an elite quarterback, whether it's a good quarterback, whether it's a middle of the road quarterback. Defensively, things just tend to change. Sometimes it's just the competition you face. Sometimes it's just maybe the Washington situation in 2025. It's the second year of the same staff. The first year was kind of a year to acclimate to a whole new scheme, a whole new system, acclimate to each other. They had a lot of players that had never played with each other, last year. And something that we pointed out, and Quinn pointed it out first, at some point, second half of the season, when he said about his run defense, he said, we've played some really good running backs, and they did last year, and they're going to again this year. So I don't know. You're not going to hear me stop talking about this, Steele, in Rockville, and that means you're going to scream more. But this is the biggest question mark, the biggest mystery, the biggest red flag, the biggest who the hell knows heading into the season. And it's not unfair based on what they did in the offseason with personnel to say that, the flag is less red than it was before free agency and before the draft. We don't know that Kinlaw, Wise, Goldman, Jones, Harris, Amos are going to be massive difference makers. I'll tell you what, I look at the players coming back. I look at Frankie Louvu, who was a great player, I think arguably a top 3 player on the team last year. This is a guy now in his prime, second year in the system. He has star potential. I mean, he was a all-pro last year. By definition, he's already a star player. I look at Louvu. I look at Daron Payne. We know what he's capable of. And he wasn't that last year, and he wasn't that the year before. If he gets back to what he was during that contract year in 2022, you've got a top 10-ish defensive tackle. You do. If he plays consistently at the level that he's capable of playing at. And the thing that I mentioned the other day, I think it was with Logan Paulson, he's only 28 years old. I mean, this is not a guy that is in his early 30s. He's 28. This is the prime of his career. I look at a guy like Dorrance Armstrong, who really came on at the end of the year and came up big in the postseason, really big in the postseason. I also look at, a guy like Johnny Newton, a talent, a playmaker in college, a havoc wreaker as the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. But remember, last year he was coming into the season off of those injuries, and, there were moments, but there certainly wasn't, a season that you could put together and say, man, this guy really showed me a lot. Maybe this is the year that Johnny Newton becomes a force. He was an absolute wrecking machine in college. Jordan McGee, they loved him, last year. Was hurt, couldn't do much. And then Marshawn Lattimore is critical because I'm not counting, personally I'm not, on Trey Amos to be ready as a rookie, just simply based on the position historically. The position historically doesn't provide, lights out play in year one. There are exceptions to the rule. We've seen him recently, with Sauce Gardner and with Pat Surtain. And last year, to a certain degree, Mikey Sanders still. But more times than not, rookies, first rounders, second rounders, third rounders, they need reps, they need games, they need experience. So Lattimore is huge in terms of what this defense will be. And then, these are the players that you really, if they're going to make a big jump from where they were last year to this year, if we're going to get that variance of wasn't good last year, but look at what happened this year, all of a sudden they're a really good defense. If you're going to get that, the players that I mentioned, I think are going to be critical to that. It's possible guys we're not thinking about who have been mentioned, John Baptiste, Hampton, could end up being, significant contributors, Percy Butler, and we're not thinking, a lot about them. But the guys I mentioned, Luvu, by the way, also Wagner not falling off a cliff age-wise. Now, maybe they think Jordan McGee is a really good player. And if Bobby Wagner isn't at 35 years old, isn't what he was last year and the year before, because he's had 2 back-to-back excellent years here. I mean, he is a Hall of Famer. But maybe they love the idea of what Jordan McGee can do or what a guy like Dominique Hampton can do. But, yeah, the guys that I mentioned, they got to have step-up situations. I think I'm most confident in Luvu. More than any other player on defense, I'm most confident in number 4. Like, that's a dude. That's a guy that really can play. And I would not be surprised if they scheme him up more as a pass rusher than they even did last year. I think he could be does he put his hand in the dirt on third down? I don't know. But, the Micah Parsons treatment, with Quinn and Witt Jr. when they were in Dallas, moving him around, which they did with Luvu last year. Maybe those 8 sacks become 12 or 13 in 2025. Maybe a guy like Dorrance Armstrong, who finished, incredibly, 3.5 sacks in the 3 postseason games, along with a huge forced fumble. Maybe he ends up becoming, the beneficiary of more size, Daron Payne's stepped up play, and Frankie Luvu maybe becoming a guy that defenses have to game plan for. But yeah, Steele in Rockville, I'm not going to stop talking about it. I mean, this is, especially when we get to training camp and we start hearing from coaches and players and we start seeing what it looks like in terms of who's going to start and what the rotation may look like. And you don't learn a lot from the games, but you learn a lot sometimes from what they say and even from those joint practices that they will hold. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm not scared of it. I'm not like it's going to suck. I'm like, it's got to step up in a big way. And it's going to be interesting to see if they figured it out with their acquisitions or they figured it out in year 2 with this, same core group. And we'll see, because with the schedule they have, and me, most of you do, I'm not a big schedule guy, but the way it looks now, and doesn't mean it's going to look that way when you get there, it's going to have to be better than it was last year, or the offense isn't going to get as many opportunities. The offense is going to have to even be better than they were last year to get back to that, 12-win total where you're contending perhaps for a division title and home field, because that's really how you get to the Super Bowl more times than not. Now, Washington won 2 road playoff games last year. They did. But the teams that played at home throughout ended up in the Super Bowl. And that usually happens more often than not. And so ultimately, to get to the Super Bowl and have a chance to win the Super Bowl, and you got to get there first, you really have to win the division. You got to beat out Philadelphia heading into this season. And therefore, you could be potentially a 1 or a 2 seed, hopefully. Could be a 3 or a 4, but hopefully a top 2 seed where you're guaranteed at least 2 home playoff games. But thanks, Steele, for reaching out. It is definitely a topic for sure, even though you don't think it is. And, the coaching standpoint, I'm not critical of their coaching. I just, if we're just looking at results, and it's not like, they had to be on the field last year in adverse situations because their offense wasn't doing enough. They were in advantageous situations throughout the season. Don't forget that. A lot of times you can look at a defense at the end of the year and say, well, they were on the field too much. They got worn down. Their offense couldn't, keep the score in a context that was competitive. No, they had an offense that was top 5 in the league. that basically didn't punt in a lot of games. So there's that too. So you got, sort of a bottom third of the league performance defensively with an unbelievable offense that gave them every opportunity to be rested and to be good. It's not like the offense was turning the ball over deep in their territory game in and game out, or going 3 and out over and over and punting from their own 10, and teams were starting with great field position. That's not what it was. We know that. I mean, there were games in which the offense literally, there was no chance that the defense was going to get them off the field. So we'll see. The results weren't good enough, period. They've got to be better in 2025. It reminds me that, the NFL is so, year to year, month to month, week to week. It's really week to week. When you have a great quarterback, sometimes you get into, no, it's more year to year. And I think they have a great quarterback. I know that some of you have reached out to say, man, you are really, really sure of Jaden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury in this offense. Yeah, I haven't given much thought at all to them not being good on offense in 2025. The only way that happens is injuries. If the offense ends up being not very good in 2025, for me, witnessing what I saw last year, there's only one way that they take a major step back, and it's health, it's injuries. Because if they trot, 5 and 17 and a better offensive line and a healthy and playing with urgency Deebo Samuel out on the field, I just don't see how this team isn't dynamic again offensively and isn't really effective offensively. It'd be hard to be as good as they were last year, but I wouldn't put it past them. I think they have the ability to be as good, if not better. They certainly got better up front. Everything they did in the offseason, there's only one, absolute in terms of where they improved, and that is along the offensive line. They added one of the top 3 pass-protecting left tackles in the game, one of the top 5, 6 tackles overall in the game. So that's where they got better. And look, they may have overperformed at times last year. I think they did. Yeah, defense heading into 2025. We might talk about it again between now and the season opener on September 7th against the Giants. Will Dawkins, the Wizards GM, will join us at 10:30. When we come back, we'll update what the Wizards did last night and tell you about the Ace Bailey saga, which is getting strange. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. We're free and live on the Odyssey app.
With the 43rd pick in the 2025 NBA Draft, the Washington Wizards select Jamir Watkins from Florida State University.
So that was the second rounder they picked up in the trade with Utah in the first round on Wednesday night when they traded from 18 back to 21. Remember, their second round pick, number 40 overall, which I forget whose that was to begin with, they had traded to New Orleans as part of the Jordan Poole CJ McCollum deal. But they picked Jamir Watkins, Florida State. Look, it's really easy on this guy. Another, 6'5" wing player, but this guy is all about his, long arms, his wingspan, and his defensive ability. How much did I watch Jamir Watkins? None. Until last night. But what you saw when you watched is you saw great anticipation, great on-ball defender. The long arms really created a problem for weaker ball handlers. I mean, the number of just pure picks he had, as a guy turned, reaching, knocking the ball out, and then going and getting it was really impressive. Very, very good competitor. Man, that seems to be a theme among the players they take. They want guys that are higher motor and very competitive. And apparently nobody helped himself as much in the combine as Jamir Watkins did. They said high level intensity, high motor defensively, steals all over the court. He's an older player. He's not 18 or 19. He's going to turn 24 next month, but he is physically filled out, from a maturity standpoint, and he can definitely get after it defensively. So that's what they got. Actually, to me, he didn't shoot it well, and the scouting report is that he doesn't shoot it well. I don't think the stroke looked that bad, to be honest with you, and he could really finish around the rim. So there was that too. So Jamir Watkins to go with Will Riley and Trey Johnson from night number one. Will Dawkins, the general manager, is going to join us here in roughly 3 minutes. So I don't know if you're following this story about Ace Bailey. Well, Ace Bailey was selected number 5 overall by the Utah Jazz. Apparently, they had no clue the Utah Jazz were even interested. And the reporting is that Ace Bailey's representatives informed a team in the top 5 that they did not want that team to select Ace Bailey. Honestly, who the hell is Ace Bailey to be dictating which teams can and can't take him? I mean, this is not Wembanyama. This isn't Zion. This isn't LeBron. All due respect. Look, many of you know that I was not the Ace Bailey guy. I recognize the talent. I do, but I just think that there were a few red flags around him, including the game he had in College Park against Maryland, which I referenced many times. But now, additional reporting this morning, I guess he was supposed to report to Salt Lake City with Walter Clayton Jr., their other first-round pick, for sort of the press conference. Summer League starts next week, and he has not reported. Now, Brian Windhorst, ESPN, said there's not a crisis yet. With the Jazz are saying he's not expected in Utah until the weekend. He wasn't on the flight with Walter Clayton Jr., but he's not expected until the weekend, needs to be there by Monday when training camp for Summer League begins. We'll see. We'll see if that works out for the Utah Jazz. All right, joining us right now, the Wizards have had a busy week, and this man's had a very busy week. The trade on Tuesday with New Orleans, 2 first-round picks on Wednesday night, and then they added another pick last night. Joining me right now, and it's a pleasure, Wizards general manager Will Dawkins. Will, thanks. I appreciate you giving me some time this morning. All the months of preparation, if not years, really. And, the 2 nights just fly by. It's over in like 28 hours. You've been through a ton of these during your career. I'm sure some of them go kind of how you plan them to go. Others end up being surprises after surprises. How would you describe this one?
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me. Happy to be on this morning. I would say very rarely do they go as you plan. I think a lot of times you just put in the work and preparation and try to build through every contingency you can think through. and we try to do that for as long as possible. But I'd say last 2 days were fun for our group. We got better, and we're able to get guys that we were targeting. So we felt good about the outcome for sure.
So rarely it goes the way it's supposed to. In the first round, you're sitting there at 6. Did it go the way you thought it would go, and did you get the guy you wanted?
Yeah, Trey's someone that we were excited about, who was in our top 5 all year. Won't tell you where he was, but he was up there. And when you get that guy, when you fall out of the top 5 on lottery night, you still feel pretty good about that. So our scouts were on him early, and we went to see him practice, play a lot early, and he just was able to continue that run in SEC play. The scoring prowess that he had was really impressive for a freshman.
So what did you love most about him?
Once we got to know him, during the visit, I really fell in love with his passion for the game, his IQ, and his ability to see the game and be ahead of plays. We threw him in a couple film sessions, put him in the workout, and threw him in Wizards play calls, and he picked up on stuff really quickly. But at the end of the day, he's a pure hooper. He's someone that has a repeatable shot. It's rare when you find someone who can shoot the ball with the same efficiency off the dribble as he does off the catch at such a high clip. So he's someone that's going to score. He's got to get better scoring at the rim, but he can score from deep. He can score from the mid-range, and he's got a passing creativity that will be, I think, exposed a little bit and enlightened a little bit more when he's with us.
Is it true, in your opinion, that once a shooter, always a shooter? Like somebody who's a shooter at 10 can still shoot it at 60?
Yeah, I think shooting is a swing skill that's hard to develop at times. You really have to work on it, but when you master it early and you have that size to where he has the wingspan to still get it off over people, that's not going to change.
Yeah, I'm actually interested in the specific things you look for in a shooter, other than he just makes a lot of them. Tell me about like what you look for in a stroke, in a setup, and how that kind of matches Trey's shooting ability.
Yeah, I think shooting is one of those skills where repetition is probably the most important thing. I think I've grown as an evaluator in terms of actual release of shots and technique. But there are some things that remain pure. And when you watch him versus some of the elite shooters, the fact that the ball gets the type of rotation it does, comes off his final 2 fingers very easily. He has the rotation, but it's also a repeatable shot, whether he shoots it quickly or has a full time to gather. And he has the range where his body mechanics are exactly the same no matter where he is. And to me, someone that has that type of balance to shoot it off 1 foot, 2 feet, wherever he catches it from, like that's a difficult shot to contest. And for us, I think it's a repeatable shot for him, which makes him the type of high arcing player that he is.
Yeah, you really see that backward rotation off those fingers, but I'm wondering about the release. Do you think it's quick enough?
I do. And I think he was someone in the SEC that had 2 players draped on him the entire last part of the season, and he wasn't getting a lot of open shots. So for him to be able to create off the dribble and get those shots, which are a little bit more tough and contested, playing with the guys that we have now, which hopefully we'll get some easier ones and he won't need to shoot it as quick. But we put him in drills where you had to catch it, not be able to bring it down, and try to keep that same elbow and release. And he's able to do it now without spending a lot of time on it.
I heard your answer the other night to Trey admitting and appreciating, by the way, that you guys showed him, some of the moments that weren't so flattering for him. And even though you said you weren't thrilled, I thought maybe some of it was tongue in cheek. Maybe it wasn't. But I loved your answer when you said that you do it because you want to see how he handles answering it. So what are you looking for in how a player handles seeing some of their rough moments?
Yeah, I think it's a big thing to just see how they communicate. They're going to be put in situations where they're going to have to talk and speak in front of the coaches and their players. I think it shows a sign of humility for a player to admit kind of what's going on, but it also gives us a lot of answers to the test. The reasons why you go to practice and you go to shoot around is to try to understand game plans and schemes and what's really being asked of them. And when players can repeat back and remember the situations and know what the coverages were, it shows you that they're at least watching and trying to get better. So we're looking for people that want to improve, won't run, and be authentic. And we're going to hit you between the eyes while you're here. We want to make sure you can handle that. And I think it's always good for us to get on the front end of that and know the type of person we're coming in, and they know the environment they're walking into. And we're always going to try to get 1% better every single day. And I think while he was here, he did that. And I think that's why he mentioned it, because when you come in, we don't just want to roll the balls out. We want to see where you're at, and hopefully you learn something.
Yeah, over the years, I've talked to so many GMs and coaches who, have said they do the same thing with young players that come in for the interviews, and they're looking to see, when they throw an interception, what happened on this play. And what they're looking for is accountability, but most importantly, did he learn from it? Or is he throwing people
Correct.
under the bus and making excuses? That's a big reveal on character. True?
Very true. The accountability piece, you do get in those film sessions, and it was the coach this, it was my teammate was supposed to be here. So you have to ask those type of questions. But we also try to do a good job of cutting it up so that we're showing the same exact situation and then making the right read as well. So like, okay, tell me the difference between this and this. What part of the season was this? When did you grow and figure this read out? Like that way we can go behind the process of it. But you're absolutely right. There are some excuse makers out there, and you don't want too many of them in your building. So that's also a tell for us.
One of the things that I noticed in watching Trey in some of those, incredible SEC games this year is just how fearless he was. Like first game in Vegas against Ohio State, he put up 20 shots. He had 10 three-point attempts and ended up with 29. You've mentioned, the competitive high motors of Riley and of Trey Johnson, and I think the guy you drafted last night as well. With scorers and shooters in particular, when a guy walks out onto the court and thinks he's open, the first time he touches the ball wherever he is there a balance of that being really good and also not being great?
Yeah, I think those guys that we drafted with Will, Riley, and Jameer, they're all at different phases of their career where they're finding themselves still, but they are confident. And when you talk about Trey and some of his performances out the gate, we'd rather have to turn you down than turn you up. And that's kind of what we look for in our players. So we want them to be aggressive, be confident, and go get it from the tip. And we think we added 3 guys that are going to do that.
Coach Thompson, John Thompson, Jr., as in the legendary Coach Thompson, worked for this station for many years. And he always said, I'd rather have to tame, an animal than resurrect a corpse. And I think that's exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. He said it a little bit more eloquently than me.
No, you said it well too. So tell us about what you guys liked in Will Riley.
Yeah. So Will's someone who has traditional size for his position. He's someone who, when you watched him prior to coming to Illinois, was someone who had the ball in his hands, could create plays, make shots, and actually get to the rim. And I think we saw that once they had some injuries at Illinois, the second part of the year, they started to put the ball in his hands and give him an opportunity to just create. And he was fearless on the offensive end, went toe-to-toe in another really physical conference. And he's someone who, when we checked in on his body, we expect him to even grow some more. So for him to be able to be 70th percentile in assist and 85th percentile in assist to turnover ratio, it means he protects the ball and looks for others while being able to score. And that's what we're looking for, guys that can just rebound it and bring the ball up. And you have Alex and Keyshawn and Bub, Bilal, and all the guys we have. We just want to play offensive basketball where you don't know who's starting it and everybody can be a threat.
Will, in watching Oklahoma City over the last 2 months, and you were a big part of, the architect of that team, and watching the players that you look for now, man, high motor, intense, highly competitive personalities are a priority for you guys, aren't they?
Yeah, there's a lot of characteristics we look for in the 94 by 50. We're pretty specific on what we look for on the court, but we also have an environmental bucket that we look for, and we send our scouts out there to get as much intel and information as we can to make sure that when we bring these guys into the building, we won't push guys, meaning that we want guys that come in that have similar attributes and are going to just only push the group forward. You don't want too many pull guys that need to be pulled around and eventually try to catch up. So right now we're in the mode of giving everyone that comes in is going to have that competitive fiber and that juice and that work ethic and be serious craftsmen, because that's the environment we're trying to build so that they push everybody in the gym. So having multiple players that want to compete and get after it, but will do so the right way and be good teammates, those guys are going to do well here in DC.
Brad Underwood said about Will Riley when you guys picked him the other night, his coach at Illinois said he's the second best offensive player he's ever coached next to Michael Beasley when he was an assistant with Frank Martin way back in the day. He's got that kind of potential offensively.
I did not see that comment. I got to know him well when he was at Oklahoma State, and I was at Oklahoma. And I remember those Beasley days at Kansas State. Those are some fun practices to go watch as a young evaluator.
I bet.
But I would say if he were to go back in the Big Ten, we expected him to have a massive jump, and you wouldn't be getting a player as offensively gifted as him in the 20s. Plus, we were able to move back and still get him and pick up 3 assets in the second round. So Mike Winger, Mike Hartman, those guys that are helping with our strategy piece. It was a good combination of evaluation and strategy coming together that first night of the draft. And we knew that we were getting a player who wouldn't be in that range if he would have went back to school. So we bet on that type of development.
All right. Tell me what you got last night in the Florida State kid. Is he Lou Dort?
He is physical. He is long. He is tough. He is defensive minded. And that's what we really liked about him. But he also was someone that moved the scoreboard and got better offensively. But each meeting with these kids are different. Got to spend a lot of time at dinner with Trey, actually got a one-on-one breakfast with Will, like before the workout. And then you get Jameer in your office and he's just like, I'm all business. I'm here to hoop. Put me on whoever you want. I'm going to compete. And you just felt that vibe. And then you went out there and did it. And you're like, you are who we thought you were. And that's why we targeted him. But he just plays with a force and a physicality on both ends. And that's kind of a rare combination when you can be tops in the country in free throw attempts, but also 75th percentile in steals. So like you're hitting people on both ends, and that's what we need.
Is Dort a good comp or not? I mean, the build isn't the same, but is that a good comp?
Not too far off. I think when Lou went undrafted, he kind of had a little bit more of an offensive vibe to him and kind of transformed and realized that's how you get on the floor, and has continued to improve offensively, defensively, and obviously a first team all defensive guy from the work he put in. So again, this is the type of kid you bet on physically to be able to put him in those type of situations.
Do you guys do that? We do that.
Do like all the other guys. Say it again. I'm sorry.
Do you guys do that? We do that all the time. Who's his comp? Who's his NBA comp? Do you do that as you evaluate players?
Yeah, as long as we're not being lazy with it. As you can imagine in those scouting meetings, I don't want the lazy comps. I want us to think through them, try to find physical comps as well as basketball comps. And sometimes you have to blend the comparisons of the two and let those guys have an opportunity. But it's more of a range. Like on a high end, he can have this type of impact on a team. And that's the most important thing that we look for.
So what's Trey Johnson's high end comp? Who?
I think he's someone who is going to make plays for others and be able to stay on the floor in the playoffs and impact it on both ends. And that's a high level player for us.
But do you have a name? Do you have a comp?
No, I think you can ask him because he kind of favors his game after a few people. But the guys that are making deep playoff runs that can play on the ball and are always a threat, he kind of fits in the mold of those guys.
We're talking to Will Dawkins, the Wizards general manager. Let me just make sure. Can you talk about the trade at this point from earlier this week or not?
Not officially. That has not gone through yet.
All right. Then let's just talk about the roster as it stands now, and maybe there are changes coming. We haven't had free agency yet, but size on the roster next year. Do you have enough of it, or is more coming?
Yeah, I would say when you look at some of the transactions that haven't gone through yet, when you're having to make those challenging and difficult decisions during the rebuild phase, the main focus is always going to be to put the organization in a position for our long-term success. And for us, the decisions we made and will continue to make are less about position and more about getting the type of guys we want in here stylistically, and then also giving them the runway to develop, but providing us strategically the most flexibility to continue to add. So as we go through this process of free agency and finalizing the roster and making moves and trades potentially, I think we have a good assortment of young players that want to play and veteran players who are more than capable of playing and are actually very beneficial and helpful to have around because they're good players on the court as well. So we have a good blend of who we want in the locker room right now. We'll definitely make a few more tweaks, but I wouldn't say we're after one specific thing heading into free agency.
Well, I think you did. If everybody was paying attention, you kind of answered the question. I think one of the parts that I just want to nail down, because I think you implied it there, is this is the year where it's time to kind of turn the team over to these very young players that you've picked the last couple of years and give them higher usage rates, more shot attempts, more minutes, etc. Right?
Yeah, I think Brian did a tremendous job. Brian Keefe, our head coach last year. 3 of those rookies that we drafted were top 5 in minutes for their rookie class. So he gave them experience, and that's when they were able to produce at a high level. We have a lot of confidence in them, but also Bilal, Champagny, AJ, some of our other young players and the players we've drafted, Tristan, to kind of give those guys an opportunity as well. And at the end of the day, staying flexible and playing deep rotations, I think is what was beneficial for a lot of these teams in the playoffs. So establishing that at an early age, I think is good as well.
All right, last one, and I appreciate the time. So how excited were you, and how much pride did you take in watching your former team, Oklahoma City, win it all?
Super happy, overjoyed for them, everyone in the city, but everyone I work with and all the teammates that, all the players that have come through in the Thunder organization. Definitely excited for all that. They have some great people over there. They deserved it. My family was super excited. My family that lived back in Oklahoma were at the games and at the parade. So happy for them. Hopefully they can keep it going down there, but we're kind of focused on building our own path here in DC. But it was a cool moment for sure.
Congrats on the last few days. Thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it.
No, anytime. You guys have a good one.
Yep. Will Dawkins, everybody, Wizards general manager. We'll talk about some of the things he said, and then Monica McNutt from ESPN will join us at 11 a.m. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. You can also watch the show now on the Team 980's YouTube page. Subscribe and like it when you get there. Will Dawkins was good. He's always good when we get the occasional opportunity to have him on the show. I liked both picks. Last night, I don't know a ton about the player they selected in Jameer Watkins from Florida State, but when you watch the highlights, and highlights don't always tell the story, but I mean, he's a relentless competitor and defender and super long arms and really kind of good feel defensively. Yeah. Lou Dort is a comp in the way he defends, not in physical build, even though they're basically the same height and same weight. Lou Dort's built like a linebacker, like a middle linebacker, and is one hell of a defender. Did you see this from the NFL yesterday? Justin Tucker, former Ravens kicker, remember they released him, has been suspended for the first 10 weeks of the upcoming 2025 regular season after the NFL, found that he violated the personal conduct policy. Tucker, if you don't know, and if you haven't followed it, sort of a Deshaun Watson situation, was accused of sexual misconduct by 16 massage therapists from 8 high-end spas and wellness centers in the Baltimore area. All of the alleged misconduct reportedly occurred between 2012 and 2016. That was during his first 5 seasons in the NFL. The Ravens just decided on May 5th to move on without him. Now, Deshaun Watson ended up getting traded for and getting the biggest, guaranteed contract, or the most guaranteed dollars in a contract in NFL history, which, by the way, led to that collusion situation in which, that was arbitrated recently. We talked about that earlier in the week. When you play quarterback and you're talented, and Deshaun Watson is talented and played at a very high level early in his career, I think teams are probably more willing, especially if you don't have one, to just go for it, which Cleveland did. Now, in that moment, Washington could have never gone for it because of the nature of the disgusting franchise that they already were. There was just no way to survive that. I mean, they were already in the moment losing customers, fans, hand over fist. And if they had done that with, all that was being investigated relative to the way they treated women in their organization, that would have been a death knell almost. In some ways, and others would have said, we got Deshaun Watson, let's go. But I think with a kicker, and by the way, let's not forget, Justin Tucker is now, he's 30, I think he's like 35, 36 years old. The kickers age well, obviously. I don't know that he's ever going to play in the NFL again. I guess late in the season, if a team that is contending loses its kicker or has a kicker problem and the suspension is over. By the way, does this suspension only happen if he's on a roster? Does it kick in if he's not on a roster, or does it start to kick in once he gets signed? I actually think it's the latter, right? Wait, hold on. Here it is. In the ESPN story, Tucker can serve the suspension as a free agent and is free to sign with an NFL team. If he were to sign with a team, he could attend training camp and play in preseason games before the suspension starts. Okay, yes, so he can serve the suspension as a free agent. So at the end of the year, after 10 weeks, he's eligible to kick for somebody. Think, late season, contending team, kicker gets injured, or kicker's missed a bunch and has been a bad kicker all year. Yeah, I guess somebody might do it, right? Somebody might do it. But kickers aren't quarterbacks. There are plenty of kickers to be had. By the way, let's also talk about the fact that Justin Tucker had a terrible season last year, his worst of his career. He was 22 of 30 on field goals. And didn't he miss like almost every kick beyond 50 or something like that? He was 73.3% on field goals, which was the lowest percentage of his career by far. No, he was 6 of 11 from beyond 50, but he missed 5 field goals from beyond 50. All right, Monica McNutt from ESPN will join us next. If you missed Will Dawkins last hour, I think we'll play some of that back for you in the final hour of the show. Joining us right now is actually one of my favorites. We have talked about Monica on the show here and there over the last couple of years. Monica McNutt from ESPN. She is also a terrific game analyst on the Knicks radio network. She's from here. Grew up in PG County, went to Holy Cross over in North Bethesda, Kensington, played there, played at Georgetown for 4 years, and now has been not only, what you do with the Knicks, but a part of all of those ESPN morning shows, especially during basketball season. And I texted you this, and I was being honest. I think what you did the last 2 nights, interviewing families and players after they get selected, is one of the hardest things to do because they're so emotional. The parents aren't used to it. They typically are nervous. The players are super young, and I just thought you did such a great job with that. But do you agree with me that that is a hard thing to do?
First of all, Kevin, thank you. And yes, God, yes, it is. It is one of my favorite assignments at ESPN, and this year marks my 4th year in that position. So I do have the benefit of some reps behind me, but it's really tricky because we spend, the week preparing. We've got media day the day before, and you could end up throwing everything you prepared out of the window. Like, it's a really sensitive read in terms of what and how best to meet the moment, but in a respectful way. Like, I'll share with you candidly, I was a little nervous about the Kaman Malawach interview. It was one of my favorites, but I hoped that I paid that young man respect. Like, I'm mindful of stereotypes and all that kind of crazy stuff. But I got some notes from some folks that worked with him at NBA Africa that thought it was just a great moment for him. And we did that well. So yeah, it's really sensitive and it's pressure. And it's literally, Kevin, it's like 45 seconds of the broadcast, but it is one of the more memorable moments. And so yeah, it's plenty of pressure, but you know what? We don't run from pressure, Kevin. Okay? Pressure
well, I know.
And pressure birds fight.
And you handle it well. I mean, you're a shooter. I know that about you.
There you
so
go.
I know you're ready to fire when you get the opportunity. But I always think in those positions on those nights, the people doing that have a much more difficult job than the viewers know. And it's really, like you said, it's very tricky. I thought, by the way, the Malawach was phenomenal. I really enjoyed VJ Edgecombe, who immediately kind of protected his mother. Did you notice that?
I love that. But again, to that point, I love that. But I was like, ooh, wrong tenor. But I think it was a good moment to show
I do too.
that he's got his mom's back. And I thought his brother added such great context in terms of watching VJ when they were at those parks in the Bahamas years and years ago. And VJ was another one that was one of my favorites. I think if we just rattle off my favorites real quick, the Wolf family was fantastic. His mom, Tina, was just over the top. But she had been over the top and so joyful the entire night, not just during that interview. I kind of liked Ace Bailey. I thought he's got some swag to him. Obviously, there were a lot of questions about that young man. And then I think Liam McNeely is one that really kind of registered as we're closing out the night, and he's waiting to hear his name called. So it was a good night.
And his mother, too, which you saw, throughout the tournaments the last couple of years. What is interesting is when on draft night, and look, you come from really good athletic stock. I think, you get to a certain point in life and you realize if both parents are athletes, the kid's got a pretty good shot. But it's just that the high percentage of these first rounders whose parents were both athletes.
Yeah. But you know what, Kevin? And you've been in sports, one of our voices in DC for years, so you know this too. Even if both parents are great, the probability to get there, right?
Yeah, of
it's
course.
Still so
of course.
Slim. And I think talking to those moms, but both parents, but moms in particular, because so many of the guys reference their mom putting the ball in their hands, which I love. Shout out to women that hoop. I hope I got a son that gets drafted one day. We'll see what happens. But I think them saying, I just hoped my son loved it, or I just wanted him to connect. Like them being able to say that, look, I don't know how this was going to go, but I honor a sport that I love and I want my son to love and let the chips fall where they may. It really is one of my favorite assignments for sure.
Yeah. Well, by the way, let me just mention one more, and that is who the Wizards picked at number 6. Trey Johnson and his father were great. And Trey Johnson, because his sense of humor about his father trying to, act as if he were a bit younger. That was funny.
That was a good one for sure.
Yeah. All right, before we talk about the draft, let's go back to, Sunday night and the completed NBA season. Do you think if Tyrese Halliburton doesn't go down and that he plays Game 7 healthy, Indiana wins?
I do not. I think it is a more compelling game, but I do not. And listen, I was in a unique position going into the finals, and, at ESPN we're asked for our selections and such. The Pacers are damn good, and we all see it now in hindsight. But I'd watched that series with the Knicks up close and personal, and they were better than the Knicks. They're faster, they're younger, they're more energized. They were good. And so as I was picking the series, Kevin, I'm like, don't be a prisoner of the moment. You were more focused on this one. You weren't able to focus as hard on the OKC one. Don't be a prisoner of the moment. OKC in 6. And I thought I was being respectful of the OKC in 6. But I say all that to say the Pacers proved what I felt in my gut, that they were very good and they were going to challenge a historic defense. But I believe in defense standing tall ultimately. And I think the Pacers have a defense that deserved more credit. And so I think in Game 7, it would have been more compelling. But I think that Dagnall and those guys had a few more chips to play. And I think SGA's ceiling as an MVP, finals MVP, scoring leader, I think he had a little bit more of a level to take it, whereas I think we'd seen the best from Tyrese so far.
Yeah, I was an idiot. I thought the Thunder would win easily. I picked them in 5. I think they're the best defensive team I've watched this time of year, playoff time, in forever. And I didn't think the Pacers had faced anything like that against the Knicks or even the Cavs. But the Indiana, obviously showed that they were ready for it. Where do you come down on, is this the beginning of a dynastic run? Are they going to be in finals, plural, and are they going to win championships, plural, over the next, 5+ years?
I guess the asterisk we have to put on that is assuming everybody stays healthy, right?
Yeah, of course.
I think this is a group that we're going to see a couple of times over the next 5 years. Do I think that they will run off back-to-back? I don't know. Trend says that's not going to happen. We have 7 different champions in the last 7 seasons. But I think the youth of this group makes them unique and poised in a way that, we thought Denver and Boston might do the same thing, but they weren't as young as this team. Now, I will be curious as they grow up and as they start thinking about second contracts. And it is sort of the life cycle of an NBA player. Even the best of guys have a business mind because they have a finite amount of time that they can be in the space. I am curious what those sort of demands, how that might play out on their interpersonal relationships. But we'll just have to wait and see. But I do think this is a team that's going to be a force in the West for a few years to come.
One quick thing. If we don't get the Jason Tatum injury and the Celtics come back, which was a possibility, the Knicks played great in that series. Would the Celtics have beaten OKC in a best of 7, both teams being healthy?
I think so. And in fact, going through the season, I had OKC coming out of the West, but this was the one that you had flopped on a few times because of how good Boston is. But Boston was good on both sides of the ball. And I just kept thinking back to the play-in tournament or the in-season tournament, let me use the proper language, and what the Bucks were able to do to the Oklahoma City Thunder, and thought that the Celtics would be able to do the same. Now, I think the Thunder grew exponentially, not mixing two words, from the time of the in-season tournament. But I think at its healthiest, Boston can get you on both sides of the ball, and they had offensive firepower that I don't know that OKC would have been able to keep up with.
If I told you next year Oklahoma City went through the season healthy and they weren't in the finals representing the West, which team would it be playing in the finals next year from the West? I mean, we haven't gone through free agency. I understand that. But do you have a gut feel for who it will be the biggest contender to OKC next year?
All right, follow me here. The first answer is actually Golden State for me. But the answer that I want to be brilliant on is Dallas, because Dallas will, in theory, be healthy minus Kyrie. They will find a serviceable point guard to hold the line in that position, but they will also have a defense that was as tough as the OKC defense. And we are going to enter a 3-year window where depth and defense kind of runs the league. And Dallas, to me, as I look at the West, is the team most poised to match up with what OKC was able to do.
We really did see a postseason where defense dominated. I had Mike Wilbon on the show the other day. He told me that there was a conscious effort And basically the word went out. They were going to let him play in this postseason. They were going to let him be physical. They were going to let him grab and hold. And we saw that, going back to that Rockets Warriors series was so intense and so chippy. This is maybe the era we're in, is the best defenses are going to win.
Yeah, and you know what? I've been in the draft hole, Kevin, but you know what? I'd also add Houston to that mix for that exact reason.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? The pieces that Houston traded, to me, were not their stoutest. The Dylan Brooks trade, I was kind of sad to see, I'll be honest, because I think he added to the edge and was a kid that added to the image of Ime Udoka, right? But they still got Tari Eason. The Thompson kid is going to be terrific on defense. And then you add KD as a sharpshooter. I think particularly in the West, it's going to be fascinating to watch because you've got, if you will, the faces of the league on that side, right, who have always been high-powered offensively. But candidly, we're seeing them begin to slow down. And we know that when guys slow, typically the side that takes the hit is defense, right? When you talk about Steph, Jimmy Butler, LeBron, even the Clippers guys to a degree, right? But if you still got a feisty defense, especially in an era where we're scoring so much and you're getting up and down the floor, but if you could come up with stops, that's just where we at. And we know this thing is such a copycat league and very cyclical.
Yeah. We're talking to Monica McNutt from ESPN. You mentioned Golden State, and I'm like one of these massive Jimmy Butler fans, but this postseason was weird when Steph got hurt. I mean, he almost was a non-participant at times on offense. And we saw that actually in a couple of games when the Heat made the finals against Denver a few years back. What do you think the deal is with some of those games where you're like, you've got to take more shots. We need 40 from you tonight.
Do you remember the KD Charles Barkley bus driver thing?
Yeah, vaguely.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess Charles Barkley made some comment about it costs to be the bus driver,
right? And
KD is like, bro, like I won championships. So basically, he was saying that KD is not the primary driver; he's a passenger on the bus,
exactly.
A very important passenger, whatever. Honestly, and I just think it's a funny analogy, but like it can still signify a ton of respect. But I'm watching Jimmy Butler emerge at this point in his career, and I had that thought, like, are you a bus driver or a passenger? And I think honesty is hugely important in all of our lives, but even in sports. Jimmy went to Golden State planning to support Superman, as he has called it,
right,
in Stephen Curry. And when that changed, I just don't know how much of the runs that we've all marveled at were sort of capturing lightning, and Jimmy was just on a heater versus like, is he a number one guy? And I don't want to get super first takey on us, Kevin, but those were my thoughts as I was watching that unfold.
Look, I don't think that's crazy. It's just that, he had 56 in a playoff game. He went for like 56 and 40 something in back-to-back games, when they took out the Celtics that year. It was like, it was insane, the playoff Jimmy, guy versus what you saw in the regular season. I just thought it was odd. By the way, you didn't mention Denver or Minnesota. And why not?
I think, well, one, maybe sometimes I'm an idiot, but Denver to me, I just think for as good as Nikola Jokic is, I'm really starting to wonder about the supporting cast there.
Yeah, well, they were injured. I mean, Porter Jr. was injured. Gordon got hurt late in that series, which was a 7-game series, which, as you know, Denver was like 3 minutes away in Game 4 from taking a 3-1 lead.
Correct. I think, yes, those injuries are, I think, important to point out this year. But I just think in general, I'm starting to wonder about that supporting cast. I think when the group that won the championship, they had, again, same kind of thing with OKC. First of all, let's all be very honest. Winning is very hard. It is very delicate, right? They got a different head coach. Some of those veteran guys that knew their role and excelled in their role are gone. When I think of that supporting cast, yeah, AG is great, but I think Michael Porter Jr. has been inconsistent at best.
Yeah.
Jamal Murray, I like, and I just think as great as Yoke is, the league, teams that, as we talk about teams that can defend, are like, cool, we'll let him have 40 and limit the assists to 10. And like, I just think there's a little bit of a formula coming in terms of how to slow Denver down. And I don't know that they've proven that they can take it to the next step. I guess I'm just a little bit hesitant on Denver.
Did you grow up?
Minnesota, I think for Minnesota, I don't know, Kevin. You got them getting back a third consecutive time. Like, is it like? I don't think it's. I just think it's not that easy.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. Look, this postseason was wild. OKC was the best team, but they were very close to being eliminated by Denver, then dominated Minnesota. Minnesota dominated the Lakers. I think the Rockets, actually, out of all the teams with what they didn't have, which was somebody who could score, are the team to watch. Amen Thompson is looks like a superstar in the making. Did you grow up a Wizards fan?
So I had an interesting relationship with the Wizards because they were bad for much of my youth.
Right.
And as you know, a basketball hooping hotbed, as we will, I legit remember being like, I can't root for the Wizards. They're terrible. And we have so much better basketball here. So in theory, I was not excited about it. But yes, I follow the team, and they're certainly my home team now. Wizards, I was all about the Mystics, though. MCI Center, Mystics first season, like all about it.
Yeah, well, because you're from here. This is, as much as it's a football, Washington Commanders, Washington Redskins, Washington football team town. At its core, this is a basketball city. From the ground roots, through high school and the two power programs with Maryland and Georgetown as well. So. Couple more and I'll let you run, and I appreciate it. Do you think Cooper Flagg is going to be a transcendent, franchise-changing kind of player?
Do you think Scottie Pippen was that type of player?
Well, coming out, I didn't know.
Okay, but we all agree, like a Hall of Fame career, like when it's all said and done. I don't know that I got Cooper being like centerpiece in the way that I think Victor Wembanyama will be, but I definitely have him being a Scottie on a great team, a guy that's like an undeniable piece in it all. But yeah, I think we're in for a lot of fun when it comes to this young man. And I just think from talking to him and talking with his family, like his compete level, as we've coined the phrase, is discussed a lot. But he's also very much a sponge, like just wants to learn the game of basketball, like, and continue to learn it at the highest level and then go out there and compete with his knowledge. I think that's important.
How did the Wizards do you think?
So Trey Jones, as we were going through tape and prepping for him, I was a big fan. Now, I think beyond the draft night, I'm still trying to figure out the trade and like what is the plan moving forward. But Kevin, you know this. We watched that organization sit through Bill years too long. And so at least I'm encouraged that they're like, what can we do to make progress now? And so I'm excited to see. You just had Will on. You tell me, because I didn't hear it. What was Will talking about?
I mean, he's a shooter. He's clearly a shooter. He's fearless. He's a high-level, high-motor competitor. I think he loves him. I think he really likes the player they got at 21, Will Riley. He said if he had gone back to Illinois, this would have been a top 5-ish pick next year.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So he really likes him. But you know this. Who knows? I mean, nobody really knows when they're 18 or 19. It's so hard to figure out. Thank you for doing this. Really good to hear your voice. You're doing an excellent job. Take care. Hope to do it with you again soon.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you, Kevin. Have a good weekend.
Monica McNutt, everybody. At McNutt Monica on X, on Twitter. A DMVer, a Georgetown Hoya, and she's doing a great job on ESPN and excellent as a game analyst on the Knicks radio network. All right, we've got some football to talk about. We'll do that when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, theteam980.com. We're free and live on the Odyssey app. So yesterday, ESPN.com did a story using their 4 beat reporters for the 4 NFC East teams. The name of the story, the title of the story was NFC East Roundtable. Can the Eagles repeat in the division? As we know, it's been since 2004 since the NFC East has had a repeat winner. Giants reporter Jordan Renan, Cowboys reporter Todd Archer, Eagles reporter Tim McManus, and of course our guy, the Washington reporter John Keim, was those 4 answered a bunch of questions when it came to the NFC East. Things like, what's on the line for your quarterback? What's been the most underrated move by your team? For John, it was just retaining the entire coaching staff. What's the biggest concern for your team? John states the obvious, the defense. And then they come to the final question. Who wins the NFC East in 2025? Everybody understands that the NFC East has not had a repeat winner since the Eagles repeated in 2004. That was part of a 3-year run, I think, of winning the division, 02, 03, and 04. So the Eagles reporter, Tim McManus, he picked the Eagles to win the division. The Cowboys beat reporter, Todd Archer, he picked the Eagles to win the NFC East. John Keim, he predicted the Eagles to win the NFC East. He writes, Philadelphia, yet another year predicting a repeat winner in a division that hasn't had one since 2004. But how do you go against the Eagles at this point? He does write, but the Commanders, who lost to the Eagles in the NFC Championship game, must answer questions on defense, though they have the right quarterback in Jaden Daniels. While the Cowboys have a first-time head coach and their own questions, the Giants will be good defensively, but quarterback remains a major issue, so until further notice, it's the Eagles. Then we get to Jordan Renan, who covers the Giants. He decided, no repeat winner in 2025. It hasn't happened since 2004. We're going to go, away from the favorite. And he picked the Cowboys to win the division. And he writes, let's get a bit crazy here because that's the recent history of the NFC East. No, not the Giants. That gap is massive. But since everyone is down on the Cowboys this season, it only makes sense that they surprise and win the division. There's still some high-end talent on that roster, and Dallas was good for at least 12 wins each of the previous 3 years that Dak Prescott played double-digit games. So this is largely contingent on him being healthy, but to count the Cowboys out with Prescott potentially having the best weapons of his career, remember they added George Pickens, seems silly. They will surprise. So, if I told you that the NFC East will continue the trend of no repeat winner, meaning the Eagles do not win the division, who wins the division? 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. There are 3 choices, obviously. Washington, Dallas, and the Giants. Dallas has a completely new coaching staff with Brian Schottenheimer taking over for Mike McCarthy. I have no idea how that will go. He's got Matt Eberflus. Remember, they brought in Matt Eberflus to be the defensive coordinator. I think he's an excellent defensive coordinator. Not a good head coach, but will be an excellent defensive coordinator. I think they'll get Micah Parsons signed before the season starts. So let's look at these 3 teams, and I'll start with the Cowboys, and I'll end with Washington. If we use the given in the equation, Philadelphia doesn't win the division, which of the other 3 teams would win the division? Again, 301-230-0980. Which team wins the division if it's not Philadelphia, and why? Dallas still does have high-end talent, among their starters. You add Pickens to obviously CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Tolbert. Remember, they traded for Jonathan Mingo. That didn't really work out, but they didn't have a quarterback. They still have a weapon that they use, by the way, as a kick returner as well, in Kevontae Turpin. Their offensive line, you got Guyton and Tyler Smith on the left side, but, there are obviously some major changes from center across to the right side. They drafted that guy, Tyler Booker, in the first round. A lot of people think he's going to be a stud at right guard. They don't really have a big-time tight end option, and then they've got a whole new backfield. They signed Javonte Williams from Denver. I've been a big Javonte Williams fan going back to when he was at North Carolina. He just has not been able to stay healthy. When he's been healthy, he's been pretty good. They also signed Miles Sanders, and they drafted Jaden Blue from Texas in the 4th round, 5th round, something like that. Defensively, Dallas can be really good defensively. With Parsons, with they lost Dexter Lawrence, obviously. That guy Overshone, remember, before he got hurt, how well he played at linebacker. They added Kenneth Murray. They've got to be healthy in the back end. Remember, they didn't get Deron Bland back until at some point during the season. They've got Trayvon Diggs coming back. Up front, they've still got Maisie Smith. They added Dante Fowler Jr. back to their roster. They added Solomon Thomas. I don't think that's a big add. They drafted the kid from Boston College that we talked a lot about heading into the draft, Donovan Azaraku, to be a pass rusher. They're going to be well coached defensively. I believe that with Eberflus. It comes down to, I guess, Prescott staying healthy and what kind of head coach / play caller is Brian Schottenheimer going to be as a head coach and a play caller? I mean, he's obviously been in that position before, with Dak. They've got 2 times the weapons, if you consider Pickens to be a weapon and not, more weapon than headache. Dallas, I could see Dallas having a much better season than a lot of people think they'll have. They have a stretch during their season where it's like Eagles, Chiefs. Hold on for 1 second. I looked at this last night. They go, I guess if you want to count at Vegas, but Eagles, this is Thanksgiving week at home on Sunday against the Eagles, Thanksgiving Day against the Chiefs, then at Detroit, then home against Minnesota and the Chargers, and then at Washington on Christmas Day. That is quite the stretch late in the season. If they get there and they're unhealthy, I mean, the season's already done. Could Dallas be that team? All of these teams with some talent, if they stay completely healthy, they could be dangerous. They could be. I mean, look, Dallas may have been the toughest matchup Washington had last year. The 2 games against the Cowboys were like mismatches up front. They really were. Then you look at the Giants. I think this is an interesting one. Bear with me on this. I think the Giants have a really good roster. I just think quarterback is a major question mark with Russell Wilson and Jackson Dart and Jameis Winston. Defensively, they are rock solid. Okay, you start. By the way, I mentioned Dexter Lawrence. DeMarcus Lawrence moved on from Dallas. They still have Dexter Lawrence. They have Brian Burns back, Okereke back. They added Abdul Carter with their 1st round pick. They've got They added Javon Holland from Miami to their secondary. They got Deonte Banks back for year 3, I think, for Banks. They've got Thibodeau still. This is a defense that was good last year, has been good. Their biggest problem is that they haven't had a supporting offense. They've had to be on the field way too much. They've had to be on the field when they're behind, when other teams, the context of the game gets sideways, the score context, that is. And then on offense, they have improved that offensive line in recent years. They've got Malik Neighbors, who looks like a superstar in the making. They've got in their backfield a guy that I thought was very underrated as a rookie last year. I thought Tyrone Tracy was outstanding. Still have Devin Singletary. They added the guy from Arizona State, Cam Skattebo. It's quarterback with the Giants. It's quarterback, 100%. Can Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston or Jackson Dart be better than what they've had, a lot better than what they've had at quarterback? I'll guess no, and I won't say the Giants, but I'm going to tell you right now, if the Giants end up being a much feistier team in 2025, it's not going to surprise me at all because they are good defensively. And they were feisty at times last year with literally no ability at quarterback for much of the year. They lost here in a close game early without a kicker. They lost to Dallas in a close game. They were right there with a chance to beat Cincinnati in a Sunday night game. You know, they had a chance against us in the Meadowlands. I'm not going to be shocked if the Giants are better than people think. But then you get to the obvious choice if we say that Philadelphia isn't going to be the first repeat division winner since 2004. If we're only picking from the other three, of course, Washington would be the favorite. And that would be my pick. Because when all is said and done, and maybe you're unsure about rosters, and is there a big difference between the Cowboys roster and the Washington roster and the Giant roster? Well, there is at one position, quarterback. So when in doubt, quarterback. Keep it simple, stupid. And Washington not only has the best quarterback of the three teams that we're considering, they've got the best quarterback in the division, and they've got the best quarterback in the conference. So for me, if it's not Philly, it's Washington. Sorry, Jordan Renan. I love the contrarian take. And by the way, and we went through this a few weeks back, when teams that have won the division to stop the favorite from repeating in the division, it's like a very high percentage of the teams that ended up winning the division in the NFC East were not the second choice. They weren't the second favorite. They were either the third favorite or the dead last favorite. So when you least expect it in the NFC East, that's when you get a surprise. Look, Washington didn't win the division last year, but they were obviously a major surprise in the division, a major surprise in the conference. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. The NFC East hasn't had a repeat winner since 2004. If they don't have a repeat winner in 2025 again, which of the other three teams do you think will win the division? Jordan Renan, the Giants beat reporter, says it would be the Cowboys. I'm going to assume that most of you will be on Washington, but phone lines are open for that. 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980 and the team980.com.
All right, last night, the NBA draft reached a conclusion. The Wiz take Jameer Watkins with the 43 overall selection, and they receive in the trade that they received from the Utah Jazz. Watkins is a two-way guard from Florida State who spent his first 2 seasons at VCU. He made a name for himself through his elite defensive prowess and his NBA-ready frame. The Washington Capitals made a trade last night, sending 2026 second-round pick and a 2027 sixth-round pick for forward Justin Sordif. The Nats, they take on the Anaheim Angels tonight. Jake Irvin takes the hill against Jose Soriano to kick off the final series of a West Coast road trip. First pitch is at 9:35, and Nats on deck with Charlie and Dave at 9:05 on the Fan. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
This is probably the easiest question for this audience that we've ever asked. But on sort of the heels of the NFC East ESPN reporters picking division winners in the NFC East, 3 of them picked the Eagles, including our own John Keim. And then Jordan Renan, the Giants reporter, picked Dallas and said, when in essence, this is what you get in the NFC East. You usually get the thing you're not expecting. And if it's not Philly, almost everybody's going to pick Washington. And historically, it isn't the team that's picked second when the, last year's division winner doesn't repeat. But I'm asking you, if it's not Philadelphia, if we don't get a repeat winner in the NFC East for the first time in 21 years, who will it be? I'm saying Washington. And I think Dallas's roster, if it stays healthy, is capable of being, a tough out. I think the Giant roster, minus the quarterback, is an interesting roster. Will they get good play from Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston or Jackson Dart? It can't get any worse than it's been for the Giants at quarterback. But the bottom line is Jaden Daniels is the best quarterback, not only among the 3 teams that we're considering. He's the best in the division. He's the best in the conference, and he's no worse than number 5 or number 6 in the league. So when in doubt, QB. Max, do you have an answer?
I kind of like where Jordan Renan's coming from here, because he is right. Like, if you look at the history of the NFC East, it's never who you expect, really. It's always somebody coming out of left field and taking the mantle. So the Cowboys is not as bad of a pick as I think it is going to be. But at the same time, I can't pick against my boys. I'm wearing the shirt right now. I can't. I have to pick the Commanders to win the NFC East.
All right, let's go to the phone lines and see what you guys think. I'll be surprised if somebody calls in with Giants or Cowboys. I guess I wouldn't be surprised if somebody says Dallas. We have a lot of Dallas fans that listen to the show, to this station. Let's start with our guy Joe in Springfield. Joe, if it's not the Eagles in the NFC East, who will it be?
Hey, Kevin, what's up?
Hey, Joe.
Okay, surprise, Kevin. You know me for so long. The Commanders. And by the way, I agree with you that Dallas' roster is good and the Cowboys will be better. The question is, Kevin, that second half schedule for the Cowboys is brutal. Starting right before Thanksgiving and ending right with us on Christmas Day. The Giants' first 4 weeks are playing Washington, Dallas, Kansas City, and the Chargers. Yeah. So, and by the way, Kevin, Brian Dable, I know, is on the hot seat, and you're having them play that 4-game stretch at the beginning of the season. That's could be an all-4 start. Who knows? But yeah, Kevin, I believe the Commanders will do it this year. And honestly, Kevin, up in Philadelphia, the Eagles coaching staff is still trying to figure out what can we do to stop Jaden Daniels, because all 3 games against Philadelphia, Washington. Yes, we beat the Eagles the second time without Jalen Hurts playing the second half. But those other games, Kevin, could have gone Washington's way as well. Even the first game up in Philly on that Thursday night, we're trailing 12-10 late in the game, and
they had a lead in the fourth quarter. They were not the better team that night, but they had the lead in the fourth quarter, right? It was 10-6, I think, going into the fourth quarter, something like that.
And if we had completed that 4th down conversion, we would have milked the clock, and we would have escaped the Philly win. So, yeah, Kevin, listen, Philly is the defending Super Bowl champion. They still have a good roster. But Washington, I am concerned about the defense, and as I have a right to be, as do you. But could the Commanders make it interesting? Yes. Is that schedule brutal? Yes. But if Jaden Daniels is under center, who knows what happens? So we'll see what happens. I will say the Commanders, and any Cowboy fans who call in, whether they set foot in Dallas or not, they can't call themselves Cowboy fans.
It wouldn't surprise me if a Cowboy fan calls in and says Washington. They're not typically the brightest of the NFC East fan bases, but it's kind of obvious. You mentioned the Giants' schedule. Listen to this to start the season. Here on September 7th, then at Dallas week 2, and then they get the Chiefs week 3 on Sunday Night Football, and then the Chargers the week after that at home. That is a brutal start to the schedule when you are on the hot seat, as Joe pointed out. Bobby in North Carolina. If it's not Philly, if the NFC East once again doesn't have a repeat winner, who wins the division?
Hey, Kev. Good morning.
Hey, Bobby.
Do you remember back, Gibbs 1.0 when we were really good, one of the best franchises, and you had that feeling, kind of nervousness in your belly, every week. You knew we were good. That's where I'm at right now with this team. I know we got a chance to be good, and I'm very just cautiously optimistic, I guess is the best way to describe it. But got that nervous feeling because I know the schedule's a whole lot harder, Kevin. You already talked about division. Division's good. I mean, you've been on the Giants for 2-3 years now.
No, I've been wrong. I've been on the Giants roster, but not the quarterback. Always a question mark about the quarterback.
You're right. I mean, you've been giving praise. I didn't mean to knock you there, but you're right. It's been the quarterback.
No, but I've been wrong. I thought the Giants were going to be better the last few years. You're right.
Well, but they got a good roster. Their defense is pretty doggone good. Trust me. I mean, if they can get a quarterback play, and they got Neighbors, they got a good receiver, so they got a good running back. So you never know. So, yeah, you're right. He's elite. But all that being said, Kev, I mean, I love our team. I mean, I'm not going to say we're not going to win the division, but we got to stay healthy. And, of course, I've been telling you all, the run defense is my biggest concern.
Sure.
We have got to stop there. And I felt really optimism until yesterday. I heard you on the podcast, and you had that 10 ways we could be a dumpster fire. And I thought about 2 or 3 of those points you followed out. I said, you know what? Kevin's got a good point. So maybe I'm not as optimistic.
Well, no, I didn't come up with 10 reasons they'd be a dumpster fire. That was a Philadelphia guy.
I know it was, but he had 3 good points, though, Kevin.
He had some good points. He had some good points.
Maybe I'm not as ginned up as I was 24 hours ago before the podcast, but hopefully we stay healthy, and it's going to be our division to win this year and, make the playoffs and have a chance to make it, to the Super Bowl. Have a good weekend, brother.
Thanks, Bobby. I really do hope, though, I really think about how awesome the end of the season would be. We're in December. It's holiday time. It's cold. Football's, dominant on TV. And you've got 2 massive showdowns in the final 3 weeks of the season for the division. You go into that Saturday, December 20th game. Let's just say Washington, if they got 3 left, they would have played 14. Washington's 10-4, Philly's 10-4, and they got 2 games against each other over the final 3 weeks. Let's make it 11-3 and 11-3. Because then you're talking about maybe for the 1 seed. That would be awesome. Because now you're talking about the continuation of playing 3 times last year and then having 2 titanic showdowns in December. What worries me about those 2 games is we're going to get there and at least one of them isn't going to mean anything. Let's go to our guy Lap in D.C. Lap, go ahead.
Hey, what's up, Kevin?
Hey, Lap.
Thanks for taking my call, man. Good show, bro. I'm going with the Commanders, man. I think we got a good chance to, win the division. As I told you last year, when we were going on that run, I said, man, we do good in the division, we got a chance to make the playoffs. And we had a chance. We led most of the season. We was leading the division, before that stretch with Pittsburgh and Dallas and Philly. But, if we can kind of handle business again, man, get 3-4 wins in the division, man, we got a great chance to win it and definitely help us.
What did we go in the division last year? We lost to Dallas. We lost to Philly once, 4-2, right? Yeah. Yeah,
4-2. The best stretch we've had, of course, when RG was here, was 5-1. We almost swept the division that year. But if you get 3 or 4 wins in your division, Kevin, I mean, it not only helps you win the division, but also helps you to make the playoffs. Because if you can't get wins in your division, man, you're talking about trying to get 8 or 9, 10 wins outside the division. That's going to be tough. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. 6 games are played in the division, 11, all right? Nearly twice as many games are played outside the division. And so those games are really important too. But, yeah, it's certainly hard to win the division if you go 1-5 or 2-4. Thanks, Lap. Appreciate it. Let's finish it up with Kenny. Kenny, if Philly doesn't repeat, which the NFC East hasn't had a repeat winner since 2004. Who will win the division?
Happy Friday, Kev.
Hey, Kenny, what's up?
Hey, first of all, man, I appreciate seeing you and Scott Van Pelt hold the DMV down and pulling, all of the DMV alum. And I really enjoyed that interview with Monica, man. That was good. That was real
she's
good,
great.
but,
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, she's awesome, man. She's awesome. To answer your question, though, I would say reluctantly Washington, simply because our own history itself says that one great year or one playoff appearance begets a disaster the next season.
Yeah.
But the thing that go ahead.
Well, we've only won the division. So the last 3 division titles, 12, obviously 13 was a disaster. 15, 16 was a good season. It was back-to-back winning seasons for the first time in a long time. But it was not a playoff season. That season finale against the Giants was a disaster. And then, 2020 into 2021. The funny thing about 2021, without the COVID, disasters of the end of season, we were right there at 6-6 going into those final 4 games. But anyway, go ahead. So you like Washington, but you're hesitant, but you like Washington if it's not Philly.
Yeah, I mean, don't you think, any fan that's, I would say, probably the age of 40 and over, you have to be reluctant, hopeful.
But we didn't win the division last year. Remember that?
Well, and that's what I mean to correct, is we had a successful season. We had a playoff season where we appeared in the playoffs. But I would say it feels good to finally be in a position where we can say, if our quarterback, barring injury, is there, then we have an excellent chance to do anything. And I can't remember the last time I've been able to say that. So I want to ride that wave, in addition to the fact that, I believe that nationally, we got some juice right now. So I just want to ride that through and support the squad. You know what I mean? Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah. Not surprising. The answers. I mean, that's the obvious choice. Washington, by the way, odds-wise in the NFC East. Hold on. Philly's the favorite, okay? And they kind of moved after the draft. Remember, they moved into a bigger favorite position. Let me see what it is right now. NFC divisions. So right now, Philly's minus 142 to win the division. They are the biggest favorite in the NFC to win their respective division, just as a comparison point. Washington is the second pick at plus 204. So they're 2-1 choice to win the division. Dallas is 7-1. The Giants are basically 20-1. But in looking at the NFC divisions, Philly is the biggest favorite. Detroit's the next biggest favorite, followed by the Bucks and then the Niners. The Niners are favored over the Rams to win the NFC West. I like the Rams. But the Niners are going to be interesting too, man, because if they stay healthy, they weren't last year. If they come back and they're fully healthy, they still have good front line, in some cases, great front line players. Ben Standig will join us next. If you missed the Wizards GM, Will Dawkins, on with us earlier on the show, we'll play it back for you later on this hour. He was really good talking about the three players they added in the draft, Trey Johnson at 6, and Ben Standing, I know, is excited about the Wizards draft. He misses the Wizards beat. Not really. We'll talk football team here in a moment, but I'm curious, what did you think about what the Wizards did with Trey Johnson, with Will Riley, and with Jameer Watkins, the 3 picks? Do you have a strong opinion on what they did?
Not in terms of like the players. Like, it's just, these guys, all the one and done stuff, it's just, so hard to figure out. I know Trey Johnson was obviously an excellent shooter, but conceptually, yeah, I continue to like what they're doing. You're taking as many. The whole, they don't label it. It's not called the process, right? But the point of the process is to get as many dart throws as you can to find talent, and that's what they're doing right now. And I don't have any issue with that. I mean, the kid they took in the second round last night, Watkins, he's 24 years old. That is young in real term. All their other young guys are like 20 and younger. Like, he's the old man of the group at 24. So they are, it's a long process, but I'm good with it. I do think, we all lamented about the fact that they didn't at the lottery get, the first or second pick. I mean, now it turns out even getting the 6th pick was one spot too far if you wanted Ace Bailey, seeing as how he would have been there at 5, presumably. But it is what it is. Trey Johnson's a pretty good consolation prize, and they just keep adding pieces.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it wasn't the consolation prize. I was more on Trey Johnson than I was Ace Bailey, but, this is a matter of opinion, and nobody really knows about any of these guys.
Yeah.
I did ask yesterday on the show, Chase, about the reports that the Wizards were interested in trading up. He thought that those reports were true, and he thought that more likely than not, it was, maybe for Harper or VJ Edgecombe to get up, into that area of the draft. Dylan Harper, I would have loved to have seen here. I like the kid from Baylor too, but they have been aggressive, trading up. It's like 5 drafts. I was talking about this yesterday. Tell me if you agree. The Koulibaly draft, the 3 first-rounders last year, the 2 picks in the second rounder this year. They've got a lot more picks next year in what is thought to be a loaded draft once again, especially at the top of it. And then maybe one more draft after that, but definitely 4 drafts. You'll end up with, somewhere in the neighborhood of 10, young players, and you hope that you have a real star and a really good 2 and 3 so that you can then start to look to contend or compete and win, probably starting in 2027 at the earliest. What do you say?
Yeah, I remember last year, the like a minute after they traded Denny Avdia to the Blazers in a deal that ultimately led them to get Bub Carrington, I tweeted, "This is confirming to me that the Wizards are not really going to be in contention till like 2029 or 2028, maybe, if one of these rookies gets going." Because the reason you make that Denny Avdia trade, who's obviously a good player, is his timeline is not matching where they are. He's, an older guy because he's been in the league. So they're trying to get everybody in the same timeline, which is now all these, 20-year-olds. By definition, almost the 20-year-olds are going to have to wait. It's going to take a couple of years for them to get going, unless they somehow land a guy who turns out to be a stud. The Thunder were the youngest team in the league this year, but at least SGA has been in the league for a minute. All the other guys are fairly young, but SGA, has been around a little bit. So the Wizards they need a lot still, but yeah, I agree that this is. This year they have to finish bottom 8 in order to keep their first round pick, and then after that, these guys will still only be like 20 and 21 and such. So yeah, they've got a little ways to go here. But everything is pointing in the right direction. And, I'm not paying for tickets, so I totally get it if that's, people are frustrated because they want to see wins. But, hopefully you can get excited about, watching. It's like, watching expensive, AAA. to a degree. But hopefully they get some of these guys continue to improve and show they can be high rotation pieces.
You mentioned somebody, and I was a big fan of his upside. They traded Denny Avdia. Denny Avdia, by the way, is just 24 years old, believe it or not. He had an unbelievable finish. Once he got completely healthy and was playing 30-some minutes a game, he averaged 26 and 12 basically over the last month and a half of the season in Portland. I actually have always felt about him and did feel about him watching him that he had, a number 3 contributor sort of, position on a contending team, a guy that would be on the periphery, if not, make an all-star game. I know people told me I was crazy, and maybe I'm still crazy, but he's only 24. He's 6'9". He can handle it. His shooting has gotten better, and he just knows how to play. And I looked this up because I was following him during the regular season just to see what kind of season, and he just ended with a flourish. And once he started averaging 35 minutes a game instead of 25, he averaged 26 and 12, not in like 6 assists. I mean, he was really good. Portland wasn't, but I think he's still got a chance to be a really, really good player. Before we get to any sort of football team conversation, stadium RFK deal has been in the news. What is your thought on everything that's happened this week with, Mendelsohn pulling it from the budget or threatening to pull it for the budget, and the vote on the stadium agreement that the city has that the mayor cut with the team may get delayed to August, may get delayed beyond that. The team isn't very happy about it. Where do you come down on all of this, on how it will play out?
Yeah, I mean, my general assumption, and then maybe this is my cynicism, is that this sounded to be like politics. Like, look, we already knew that some people on the council, including Mendelsohn, didn't exactly love parts of this, but he even said, right after that press conference with Josh Harris and Mayor Bowser a few weeks back, that it's going to get done, but we got to go through the steps. So to me, it just feels like on the surface that they're saying, hey, look, to Josh Harris, we want to get this done, but if you want this done on the timeline that you want, we need to renegotiate here a little bit. What they want to renegotiate, I don't know. I know there was a point that was made a few weeks back that, I think the deal has the Commanders paying like $1 or rent like $1 a year or something.
Yeah.
Whereas like the Nats, I think, are paying like $6 million or something. So I don't know what it would be, but the second the Commanders said they were going to wanted to do this, it felt to me like the leverage shifted to DC. Again, not saying, hopefully they're working together and they can find a good deal that makes sense for both. Now, if they really need to study this more, whatever that means, literally read the documents or have, hire somebody to, I'm just like, whatever it is, that hire a group to, do some more studying on this, because it has only been a few weeks. Maybe there's something to that, but, the Commanders have been pretty, insistent that, hey, we need to get this done by, that July 15th deadline for the DC budget, because, 2030, if you want that to happen, that's, it takes a while to get the ball rolling. They would get shovel in the dirt sometime next year and go from there. And, we talk about it from the perspective of the Commanders, but they're also looking at all these other events they're trying to bring to the city, like the Women's World Cup in 2031. And, it's hard. You're not going to be able to get groups to commit to showing up if you can't commit to you're going to have a stadium. So I think that's the rub. Again, I would imagine something gets done, but
the Women's World Cup. I'll interrupt. Tommy just went nuts yesterday with me on the podcast. He's like, really? The Women's World Cup in 2031? That's what you're using as, trying to create urgency. But the truth is, it is a big event, and it would be great for the city as much as it would be great for the team and everything that they would have invested in hosting that.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, Taylor Swift has not announced her 2031 concert tour. Like those things don't exist. A lot of the other events, like say the Final Four, that's probably they've already probably booked that, beyond 2030 already. So yeah, I mean, this is the next thing, and it's just an example of, hey, we want to start to do this. I mean, look, obviously, if they somehow didn't get that done, I don't think it's the whole thing's not going to fall apart. But the larger point is they want to get this done, and in order to get this done by 2030, which is also, of course, for the football side of things. I mean, that's ultimately what the the primary goal is. Let's go. Well, we everybody's been waiting. Let's get this done. So we'll see. I can't even imagine what it would take for the deal to collapse to a degree that Harris would even consider going back to Maryland or staying in Maryland. So it's not that. I don't think it's just, hey, what are we doing here? But again, DC has the right to shape the deal, and we'll see what they do.
Talking to Ben Standig at Ben Standig, that is, on X, on Twitter. Ben Standig writes for The Athletic, and he's got a really good podcast called Last Man Standig. So I just did a segment where, no NFC East repeat winners, we all know, since 2004. So if the Eagles don't become the first since 2004 to repeat, who wins the division? Obviously, in this market, everybody's going to say Washington. Jordan Renan, who writes for ESPN.com, covers the Giants, actually picked the Cowboys. And if you look at the rosters, they're comparable. The Dallas healthy, even the Giants roster is pretty impressive. But I won't ask you the same question. I'll just ask you this. Who's going to win the NFC East in 2025?
I mean, it's hard to not say the Eagles, except for the fact that, as you just laid out, that repeat winners don't happen here. It's certainly plausible that they have a bit of that, Super Bowl champion hangover. Their team, I think it's fair to say they got a little bit worse in the offseason just because they lost some guys, especially on the defensive line. They still are very talented, but I don't know. I mean, obviously Washington has, Jaden Daniels, and they, the momentum from last year. We all have questions about the defense. We'll see. I think Dallas. I mean, Dallas has a lot of obviously high end talent. So they did make some additions this offseason that felt like they were sort of finally addressing some of their bigger needs that they didn't deal with last year. So yeah, it wouldn't stun me if Dallas shot up. And I do think the Giants, their defense should be pretty good. That defensive line is going to be impressive.
Yeah.
And whatever Russell Wilson is, he's better than what they've had in recent years. So look, I think all these teams to some degree could feel optimistic, but I'd have to go Philly. It's a lame analysis just to say, well, they just look what they did last year, but that kind of is my default until proven otherwise. It's hard for me to say the hangover until I get it, but we get to see them actually do some things. But I would say Philly, but history says I'm way wrong by making that call.
Any feel for Terry McLaurin? Any update? Any anything you've learned, or are we just all waiting for right before camp?
I don't know if it's right before camp, but yeah, I think it's still. My sense is that it's still quiet at the moment. I'm sure there's a contact going on to some degree, but I haven't heard anything that would, tell me that it's, we're going to have to talk about this on Monday or anything like that. So, my stance has been, wake me up when we get to training camp and, players are reporting and he hasn't signed a deal. Then I start to get a little more concerned. But for now, I'm just, similar to what we just talked about with the DC stadium stuff. This is part of the process. Everybody's got to, do what they need to do to get the best deal. But, I'd be stunned if they can't figure out how to some sort of common ground. We've talked about before, unless Washington is putting a real emphasis on, the age thing with him turning 30 this year, which, for that position, I understand that the drop off can start somewhere around there, but he's shown no signs of that at all. So hopefully I would think that can't be too big of a deal. But other than that, I would just imagine they eventually do get something done, somewhere in that $30 million range. Maybe it's a little bit less, but that will be the range I keep looking at.
Yeah, me too. Right around 30 makes sense. And, there's going to be a significant cash outlay for the team, the biggest one they've made for a player since they took over as owners of this team. But I was thinking that, what if you got into some sort of protracted, holdout? I don't see that happening. I think worst case is Terry just plays 2025 on the final year of his deal, and then the team can, choose to franchise tag him next year or get him signed. I hope it doesn't come to that because it never feels great. Especially in this situation, it wouldn't feel great if they didn't get a deal done. It happens. Players go into their final year, play on their final year deal. But you agree, right, that if it did happen and he played just on the final year of his deal, that it would be kind of it just wouldn't feel right. There are players that have done it in recent years after contract negotiations that haven't gone well. But this one just wouldn't feel right because of, I think, how much respect and how well liked he is.
No, 100%. If they're going to say they have a standard for the type of player they want, or not just a player, but the type of person they want, I don't know how you look at Terry McLaurin and say, here's the prime example. This guy, he puts in the work. He speaks up when he needs to in the locker room. He helps players out. He's great in the community, and he's a hell of a player. And our quarterback, he's the go-to weapon for Jaden Daniels. So it would feel very odd if they didn't get things done. He could play it out, but even with that, they have this is the problem why agents hate the franchise tag, because the Commanders can always be like, cool, we'll play it out, and if we want to, we'll just tag you next year, and there's nothing he can do. So. Yeah, when you start to get to that situation, it becomes, unsettling. The player starts to lose some trust in the organization, and that's the absolute last thing you want here. Because again, what he represents in that locker room, for that guy to question what's going on in the building would be problematic. And I think that has to be factored into what they do, which is why I ultimately think it gets done. But yeah, no, if it does go a long way into camp, that would be not good.
Let's assume Terry's in the fold and he's ready to play 2025 and everybody's happy. Who's the second leading pass reception guy on the team next year?
Good question. Well, I guess I'll say Deebo Samuel, but he's not going to be like a volume pass catcher. He is not a traditional receiver. He's more of a gadget guy, plays in the slot, can play outside. But you just find different ways to get him the ball. That's why he gets touches. But the other reason I would pick him is, look, Noah Brown's history of his career is he does not stay healthy. And not that Deebo is a guy that's he's not Cal Ripken Jr., but plays a bit more. So if Noah Brown doesn't play the full season, misses X amount of games, I don't see another wide receiver catching enough passes. I guess I could refrain that and say maybe it's Zach Ertz is number 2. I forgot about him. Maybe Zach Ertz again. Hopefully he can stay healthy. So yeah, I guess if we're talking number of catches, yeah, I'll change my mind to Ertz, because he's even if they're underneath, he obviously proved to be a really reliable target for Jaden last year, and he is more of a volume pass catcher based on what they did last year. So yeah, okay, I'm revising. I'll go with Ertz.
In San Francisco, he, I think, has only led the team in receptions once back in 21. It's been Ayuk and Kittle and McCaffrey who have consistently been ahead of him, or at least 2 of the 3 were ahead of him in San Francisco. But obviously, yardage and overall yardage, including some of his rushing yardage, has been a big deal. All right, thanks for doing this. Have a good weekend. I'll talk to you on Monday.
Always, man. See you.
Ben Standig, everybody. The all too early NBA mock drafts are out. This isn't something that you're probably waiting on in terms of the players that will be picked, but Who gets projected more than anybody else to pick number one in next year's NBA draft? I'll give you the answer when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. So when the NBA draft ends, just like with the NFL draft, you get the all too early 2026 mock drafts. ESPN's is out picking number one on the clock. Washington Wizards. Now, of course, that, is the odds that they are factoring in that they finish as one of the worst teams in the league, the third, one of the three worst teams in the league, and they win the lottery next year. They've got the Utah Jazz and the Brooklyn Nets. Now, is the Brooklyn Nets picking? I think they've got a protected pick. And then same thing with CBSSports.com. The Wizards are projected to have the number one pick, and they both have the same player. So next year's NBA draft is loaded at the top of the draft. Darren Peterson is the number one player in America. He's going to Kansas. He's a 6'6" point guard. You will, hear a lot about him, watch a lot of him at Kansas next year. Everybody believes he will be the best player, or certainly one of the best players in college basketball next year. He was the best player in high school this year, a scoring point guard, a high flyer, the whole thing. Darren Peterson, one of those people. Both CBS Sports and ESPN.com project Washington to take Darren Peterson number one overall next year. Cameron Boozer, one of the twin sons of Carlos Boozer, has been sort of a projected number one, number two, number three pick in the 2026 draft forever. He's going to Duke, and he'll play next year at Duke, where his father played. 6'9", one of the, best high school careers and one of the best high school players people have ever seen. Played for that Columbus in Miami. They've been a powerhouse with him. So he's going to be in the mix. AJ Dibansa, who is a 6'9" guy playing last year in the state of Utah, is going to BYU. He's thought to be in the mix for number 1 overall as well. Then there are guys like Nate Ament. He's going to Tennessee. And a few others. There's this kid that's going to Kentucky that's kind of a center, 6'10", 6'11". So, yeah, next year's draft, super loaded at the top. So if they didn't get their, superstar top 5 player in this draft, next year will be another opportunity, because more likely than not, with the age of the team that they will put out on the floor next year, they're going to win 20-something games and be in that bottom 3, more likely than not. So stay tuned for that. But next year's draft should be exciting. But it's always interesting to see. I mean, not that I thought the Wizards would be, projected to take the number 7 pick or outside the lottery. Let's just hope they get a little better luck in the lottery next year. But even that doesn't guarantee you anything. But Darren Peterson, I've watched some of the highlights of this kid in high school. Kansas has a chance to be really good. Boy, they were disappointing. You know who did not get selected in the draft? And remember, after his first year at Michigan, Hunter Dickinson was thought to be, a star, the whole thing. I think New Orleans added him on an undrafted free agent 2-way deal. But Hunter Dickinson did not get drafted. But look, I'm not feeling sorry for him. He made a lot of money in college, with Kansas the last couple of years. There was always an issue with Hunter Dickinson, who went to DeMatha, famously, ripped Mark Turgeon for not recruiting him. Turns out he was a bit of a head case, in his college career, very long college career. Went after Turge in Maryland when they played him that year 3 times, including in the Big Ten tournament. Some great games with Michigan that year. But he had that issue that you can't have if you're a big man. You can't be short-armed. It just doesn't work no matter what your height is. If you've got short arms, you are going to be downgraded significantly. Tyler Hansbrough was one of the greatest college players in the history of the ACC, in the history of college basketball. He had a decent NBA career playing in Indiana, primarily, right? Tyler Hansbrough mostly played for the Pacers. I'm looking it up. But he always had an issue, and it's the reason I think he stayed and played 4 college years, is at 6'9", 6'10", relentless competitor, but he had super short arms, and it always limited him. Played for the Pacers for 5 years, and the Raptors for 3, and then the Hornets for 2. He had an 8-year NBA career, and then played overseas a bunch. Looks like in China. All right, when we come back, if you missed it in the very beginning of the show, Wizards GM Will Dawkins jumped on with us. We'll play that back for you next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, and the Team980.com.
All right, the NBA draft has reached its conclusion. The Wizards take Jamir Watkins with the 43rd overall selection that they received in the trade with the Utah Jazz. Watkins is a 2-way guard from Florida State, who spent his first 2 seasons at Virginia Commonwealth and has made a name for himself through his elite defensive prowess and NBA-ready frame. The Washington Capitals made a trade last night, sending a 2026 second-round pick and a 2027 sixth-round pick to Florida for forward Justin Sordif. The Nats are underway in Anaheim tonight. The Jake Irvin will take the hill against Jose Soriano to kick off the final series of a West Coast road trip for the Nats. The first pitch is at 9:35. Nats on deck with Charlie and Dave at 9:05. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1 and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
By the way, if you're interested, I am. The Wizards right now have 2 first-round picks next year and 6 second-round picks. I'm sorry, 2 first-round picks and 8 second-round picks next year as of now. That could change. There are swap rights, there are protections, all those different things. But they are loaded up in the draft next year and in 2027, 2028, and 2029 as well. Pretty set for 2030 if you're interested. So earlier on the show, the general manager of the Washington Wizards, Will Dawkins, gave us some time. I started off by asking him sort of about how this draft went. You know, they prepare forever. Some drafts go exactly as they sort of plan them out. Others tend to throw curveballs. How would he describe this draft from the last 2 nights?
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me. Happy to be on this morning. I would say very rarely do they go as you plan. I think a lot of times you just put in the work and preparation and try to build through every contingency you can think through. And we try to do that for as long as possible. But I'd say last 2 days were fun for our group. We got better and we're able to get guys that we were targeting. So we felt good about the outcome for sure.
So rarely it goes the way it's supposed to. In the first round, you're sitting there at 6. Did it go the way you thought it would go? And did you get the guy you wanted?
Yeah, Trey's someone that we were excited about, who was in our top 5 all year. Won't tell you where he was, but he was up there. And when you get that guy, when you fall out of the top 5 on lottery night, you still feel pretty good about that. So our scouts were on him early, and we went to see him practice, play a lot early, and he just was able to continue that run in SEC play. The scoring prowess that he had was really impressive for a freshman.
So what did you love most about him?
Once we got to know him during the visit, I really fell in love with his passion for the game, his IQ, and his ability to see the game and be ahead of plays. We threw him in a couple film sessions, put him in the workout and threw him in Wizards play calls, and he picked up on stuff really quickly. But at the end of the day, he's a pure hooper. He's someone that has a repeatable shot. It's rare when you find someone who can shoot the ball with the same efficiency off the dribble as he does off the catch at such a high clip. So he's someone that's going to score. He's got to get better scoring at the rim, but he can score from deep. He can score for the mid-range, and he's got a passing creativity that will be, I think, exposed a little bit and enlightened a little bit more when he's with us.
Is it true, in your opinion, that once a shooter, always a shooter? Like somebody who's a shooter at 10 can still shoot it at 60?
Yeah, I think shooting is a swing skill that's hard to develop at times. You really have to work on it, but when you master it early and you have that size to where he has the wingspan to still get it off over people, that's not going to change.
Yeah, I'm actually interested in the specific things you look for in a shooter, other than he just makes a lot of them. Tell me about like what you look for in a stroke, in a setup, and how that kind of matches Trey's shooting ability.
Yeah, I think shooting is one of those skills where repetition is probably the most important thing. I think I've grown as an evaluator in terms of actual release of shots and technique, but there are some things that remain pure. And when you watch him versus some of the elite shooters, the fact that the ball gets the type of rotation it does, comes off his final 2 fingers very easily. He has the rotation, but it's also a repeatable shot, whether he shoots it quickly or has a full time to gather. And he has the range where his body mechanics are exactly the same no matter where he is. And to me, someone that has that type of balance to shoot it off 1 foot, 2 feet, wherever he catches it from, like that's a difficult shot to contest. And for us, I think it's a repeatable shot for him, which makes him the type of high arcing player that he is.
Yeah, you really see that backward rotation off those fingers, but I'm wondering about the release. Do you think it's quick enough?
I do. And I think he was someone in the SEC that had 2 players draped on him the entire last part of the season, and he wasn't getting a lot of open shots. So for him to be able to create off the dribble and get those shots, which are a little bit more tough and contested, playing with the guys that we have now, which hopefully we'll get some easier ones and he won't need to shoot it as quick. But we put him in drills where you had to catch it, not be able to bring it down, and try to keep that same elbow and release. And he's able to do it now without spending a lot of time on it.
I heard your answer the other night to Trey admitting and appreciating, by the way, that you guys showed him, some of the moments that weren't so flattering for him. And even though you said you weren't thrilled, I thought maybe some of it was tongue in cheek. Maybe it wasn't. But I loved your answer when you said that you do it because you want to see how he handles answering it. So what are you looking for in how a player handles seeing some of their rough moments?
Yeah, I think it's a big thing to just see how they communicate. They're going to be put in situations where they're going to have to talk and speak in front of their coaches and their players. I think it shows a sign of humility for a player to admit kind of what's going on, but it also gives us a lot of answers to the test. The reasons why you go to practice and you go to shoot around is to try to understand game plans and schemes and what's really being asked of them. And when players can repeat back and remember the situations and know what the coverages were, it shows you that they're at least watching and trying to get better. So we're looking for people that want to improve, won't run, and be authentic. And we're going to hit you between the eyes while you're here. We want to make sure you can handle that. And I think it's always good for us to get on the front end of that and know the type of person we're coming in, and they know the environment they're walking into. And we're always going to try to get 1% better every single day. And I think while he was here, he did that. And I think that's why he mentioned it, because when you come in, we don't just want to roll the balls out. We want to see where you're at, and hopefully you learn something.
Yeah, over the years, I've talked to so many GMs and coaches who, have said they do the same thing with young players that come in for the interviews, and they're looking to see, when they throw an interception, what happened on this play. And what they're looking for is accountability, but most importantly, did he learn from it? Or is he throwing people under the bus and making excuses? That's a big reveal on character. True?
Very true. The accountability piece, you do get in those film sessions, and it was the coach this, it was my teammate was supposed to be here. So you have to ask those type of questions. But we also try to do a good job of cutting it up so that we're showing the same exact situation and then making the right read as well. So like, okay, tell me the difference between this and this. What part of the season was this? When did you grow and figure this read out? Like that way we can go behind the process of it. But you're absolutely right. There are some excuse makers out there, and you don't want too many of them in your building. So that's also a tell for us.
One of the things that I noticed in watching Trey in some of those, incredible SEC games this year is just how fearless he was. Like first game in Vegas against Ohio State, he put up 20 shots. He had 10 three-point attempts and ended up with 29. You've mentioned, the competitive high motors of Riley and of Trey Johnson, and I think the guy you drafted last night as well. With scorers and shooters in particular, when a guy walks out onto the court and thinks he's open, the first time he touches the ball wherever he is there a balance of that being really good and also not being great?
Yeah, I think those guys that we drafted with Will, Riley, and Jameer, they're all at different phases of their career where they're finding themselves still, but they are confident. And when you talk about Trey and some of his performances out the gate, we'd rather have to turn you down than turn you up. And that's kind of what we look for in our players. So we want them to be aggressive, be confident, and go get it from the tip. And we think we added 3 guys that are going to do that.
Coach Thompson, John Thompson, the junior, as in the legendary Coach Thompson, worked for this station for many years. And he always said, I'd rather have to tame, an animal than resurrect a corpse. And I think that's exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. He said it a little bit more eloquently than me.
No, you said it well too. So tell us about what you guys liked in Will Riley.
Yeah. So Will's someone who has traditional size for his position. He's someone who, when you watched him prior to coming to Illinois, was someone who had the ball in his hands, could create plays, make shots, and actually get to the rim. And I think we saw that once they had some injuries at Illinois, the second part of the year, they started to put the ball in his hands and give him an opportunity to just create. And he was fearless on the offensive end, went toe-to-toe in another really physical conference. And he's someone who, when we checked in on his body, we expect him to even grow some more. So for him to be able to be 70th percentile in assist and 85th percentile in assist to turnover ratio, it means he protects the ball and looks for others while being able to score. And that's what we're looking for, guys that can just rebound it and bring the ball up. And you have Alex and Keyshawn and Bub, Bilal, and all the guys we have. We just want to play offensive basketball where you don't know who's starting it and everybody can be a threat.
You know, Will, in watching Oklahoma City over the last 2 months, and you were a big part of, the architect of that team, and watching the players that you look for now, man, high motor, intense, highly competitive personalities are a priority for you guys, aren't they?
Yeah, there's a lot of characteristics we look for in the 94x50. We're pretty specific on what we look for on the court, but we also have an environmental bucket that we look for, and we send our scouts out there to get as much intel and information as we can to make sure that when we bring these guys into the building, we won't push guys, meaning that we want guys that come in that have similar attributes and are going to just only push the group forward. You don't want too many pull guys that need to be pulled around and eventually try to catch up. So right now we're in the mode of giving everyone that comes in is going to have that competitive fiber and that juice and that work ethic and be serious craftsmen, because that's the environment we're trying to build, so that they push everybody in the gym. So having multiple players that want to compete and get after it, but will do so the right way and be good teammates, those guys are going to do well here in DC.
Brad Underwood said about Will Riley when you guys picked him the other night, his coach at Illinois, said he's the second best offensive player he's ever coached, next to Michael Beasley when he was an assistant with Frank Martin way back in the day. He's got that kind of potential offensively.
I did not see that comment. I got to know him well when he was at Oklahoma State, and I was at Oklahoma. And I remember those Beasley days at Kansas State. Those are some fun practices to go watch as a young evaluator.
I bet.
But I would say if he were to go back in the Big Ten, we expected him to have a massive jump, and you wouldn't be getting a player as offensively gifted as him in the 20s. Plus, we were able to move back and still get him and pick up 3 assets in the second round. So Mike Winger, Mike Hartman, those guys that are helping with our strategy piece. It was a good combination of evaluation and strategy coming together that first night of the draft. And we knew that we were getting a player who wouldn't be in that range if he would have went back to school. So we bet on that type of development.
All right. Tell me what you got last night in the Florida State kid. Is he Lou Dort?
He is physical. He is long. He is tough. He is defensive minded. And that's what we really liked about him. But he also is someone that moved the scoreboard and got better offensively. But each meeting with these kids are different, got to spend a lot of time at dinner with Trey, actually got a one-on-one breakfast with Will, like before the workout. And then you get Jameer in your office and he's just like, I'm all business. I'm here to hoop. Put me on whoever you want. I'm going to compete. And you just felt that vibe. And then he went out there and did it. And you're like, you are who we thought you were. And that's why we targeted him. But he just plays with a force and a physicality on both ends. And that's kind of a rare combination when you can be tops in the country in free throw attempts, but also 75th percentile in steals. So like you're hitting people on both ends, and that's what we need.
Is Dort a good comp or not? I mean, the build isn't the same, but is that a good comp?
Not too far off. I think when Lou went undrafted, he kind of had a little bit more of an offensive vibe to him and kind of transformed and realized that's how you get on the floor, and has continued to improve offensively, defensively, and obviously a first team all defensive guy from the work he put in. So again, this is the type of kid you bet on physically to be able to put him in those type of situations.
Do you guys do that? We do that.
Do like all the other guys. Say it again. I'm sorry.
Do you guys do that? We do that all the time. Who's his comp? Who's his NBA comp? Do you do that as you evaluate players?
Yeah, as long as we're not being lazy with it. As you can imagine in those scouting meetings, I don't want the lazy comps. I want us to think through them, try to find physical comps as well as basketball comps. And sometimes you have to blend the comparisons of the two and let those guys have an opportunity. But it's more of a range. Like on a high end, he can have this type of impact on a team. And that's the most important thing that we look for.
So what's Trey Johnson's high end comp? Who?
I think he's someone who is going to make plays for others and be able to stay on the floor in the playoffs and impact it on both ends. And that's a high level player for us.
But do you have a name? Do you have a comp?
No, I think you can ask him because he kind of favors his game after a few people. But the guys that are making deep playoff runs that could play on the ball and are always a threat, he kind of fits in the mold of those guys.
We're talking to Will Dawkins, the Wizards general manager. Let me just make sure. Can you talk about the trade at this point from earlier this week or not?
Not officially. That has not gone through yet.
All right, then let's just talk about the roster as it stands now, and maybe there are changes coming. We haven't had free agency yet, but size on the roster next year. Do you have enough of it, or is more coming?
Yeah, I would say when you look at some of the transactions that haven't gone through yet, when you're having to make those challenging and difficult decisions during the rebuild phase, the main focus is always going to be to put the organization in a position for our long-term success. And for us, the decisions we made and will continue to make are less about position and more about getting the type of guys we want in here stylistically, and then also giving them the runway to develop, but providing us strategically the most flexibility to continue to add. So as we go through this process of free agency and finalizing the roster and making moves and trades potentially, I think we have a good assortment of young players that want to play and veteran players who are more than capable of playing and are actually very beneficial and helpful to have around because they're good players on the court as well. So we have a good blend of who we want in the locker room right now. We'll definitely make a few more tweaks, but I wouldn't say we're after one specific thing heading into free agency.
Well, I think you did, if everybody was paying attention, you kind of answered the question. I think one of the parts that I just want to nail down, because I think you implied it there, is this is the year where it's time to kind of turn the team over to these very young players that you've picked the last couple of years and give them higher usage rates, more shot attempts, more minutes, et cetera, right?
Yeah, I think Brian did a tremendous job. Brian Keefe, our head coach last year. 3 of those rookies that we drafted were top 5 in minutes for their rookie class. So he gave them experience, and that's when they were able to produce at a high level. We have a lot of confidence in them, but also Bilal, Champagny, AJ, some of our other young players and the players we've drafted, Tristan, to kind of give those guys an opportunity as well. And at the end of the day, staying flexible and playing deep rotations, I think, is what was beneficial for a lot of these teams in the playoffs. So establishing that at an early age, I think, is good as well.
All right, last one, and I appreciate the time. So how excited were you, and how much pride did you take in watching your former team, Oklahoma City, win it all?
Super happy, overjoyed for them, everyone in the city, but everyone I work with and all the teammates that all the players that have come through in the Thunder organization. Definitely excited for all that. They have some great people over there. They deserved it. My family was super excited. My family that lived back in Oklahoma were at the games and at the parade. So happy for them. Hopefully they can keep it going down there, but we're kind of focused on building our own path here in DC. But it was a cool moment for sure.
Congrats on the last few days. Thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it.
No, anytime. You guys have a good one.
That was from earlier with the general manager of the Wizards, Will Dawkins. So we are done with the NBA draft. Free agency comes up in the next week. Next week, July 4th, right? Yeah. Next week is July 4th, Friday of next week. And then you get free agency, I think, the following week in the NBA. That'll be interesting for sure. Don't expect the Wizards to be major big spenders. It is interesting. One thing that he said is that trade from earlier this week isn't finalized until July 6th. And it is possible that there's another part to that trade with CJ McCollum or with Kelly Olynyk. We'll find out next week. That was a lot of NBA this week. I enjoyed it. I know some of you did. We'll be back to primarily football and a lot more next week. Have a great weekend. Stick around. Chris Russell's next.